Hello and welcome to the Worn and Wound podcast. My name is Zach Kazan. I am the editorial director at Worn and Wound. Thank you for joining us yet again for another new episode of the podcast. This is our monthly Q&A episode. We've got a bunch of questions submitted from our Worn and Wound Plus Slack. I'm really happy to be joined by two guests. We've got Cat Shoulders, who is the director of media director or director of media. I always get this confused.
I don't know.
Cat. All right, whatever. One of those two. Cat Shoulders back on the podcast. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We've also got returning to the podcast after, I think, like about a year or so, maybe more-ish, Cait Bazemore, Worn and Wound contributor. Cait, it's a real pleasure to have you on the podcast again. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. And I'm loving how you're just like flanked by two power watch ladies here, Zach. I feel like there's going to be some good like energy in the room here.
Yeah. I mean, listen, nothing wrong with that. I have no complaints. That's very, very proud of our female staff and contributors at Worn and Wound. One of the most diverse groups of watch media professionals in the game, I think. I'm proud to say. So, Cait, thank you for joining us, and particularly on our Q&A episode, which can get a little ridiculous. You've been warned. We have some non-watch related questions coming at you today. Before we do that,
questions that might make me hungry.
Yeah,
true. This is
true.
True.
There are always food related questions on the Worn and Wound podcast. Regardless, there's always some food talk.
Yes.
Before we get to the questions, we will of course do a wrist check because that's customary here on the podcast. Kat, why don't you kick us off? What are you wearing today?
I am wearing let's see if I can pull it up on camera, my Custom Fears Jump Hour today. Yeah, with the blue dial.
Excellent choice.
Yeah.
We'll link to the podcast where you talk about that watch and the kind of like why it's meaningful to you in the show notes. But yeah, that's a great watch. Cait, how about you? You wearing a watch today? What have you got on your wrist?
No, I'm going to frighten everyone. I'm horribly prepared. Didn't think about this at all. In my defense, was running back here from a doctor appointment moments ago, and I knew that stuff would be happening on my arms. So I am not wearing something. I can grab something.
No, listen.
Nearby.
We strive for authenticity here. It's that's totally fine.
I'm horrible.
We've all been in there. We've all been there. We've all been there.
Speak for yourself, Kat. I always come on the podcast with a watch on my wrist, but that's okay. We strive for authenticity on the podcast. It's not a requirement to. Early in the year we had a string of podcasts where guests were not wearing watches, and it was a phenomenon, and I thought we were out of that.
Yeah.
Kate's brought us back. It's okay.
I've learned also just to keep randoms on my desk for this purpose because there are days I just forget to put one on.
Yeah,
all the time.
I know. As you were answering, because I do I have something like on my. I was like, can I go off camera for a second and just kind of like reach really far and grab something, or am I gonna have to just like be real with everyone?
No, be real.
Always be real.
Yeah.
Always be real. I'm wearing my Christopher Ward Belcanto today. I have it on a new strap. I'll put it on the screen here. This is a Stingray strap that I picked up at Wind Up Dallas. I thought it was fun. I thought it was cool. This is from
who did you buy that from? The strap?
Watch Innovation Straps, the Dallas-based strap maker that was at Wind Up. I bought a few straps from them. Really nice quality. Cool. This is not an ad. I am an actual customer. I bought their straps, and I'm a fan. So.
It's very bold.
It is very bold. I like
it.
I like a Stingray strap. I used to use Stingray straps on vintage watches. I always thought that was a cool look for certain vintage watches.
Yeah.
They're nice, but this is the first one I've had in a while.
I've
it's
never
cool.
owned a Stingray.
Yeah, it's fun.
I like how colorful both of your watches were. Like you both brought some vibrant spring on the precipice kind of energy with the wrist.
That's what I'm thinking.
Here,
I'm ready for spring. There was a little. I went out to grab a coffee earlier this morning, and there was just a little bit of snow falling from the sky.
Oh my gosh!
In Concord, New Hampshire, but that's okay. It spring's right around the corner. But it's here, isn't it? Technically, it's spring right now as we speak. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Allegedly.
Think positive spring thoughts.
The spring, I feel like in the States, or at least in New York, we call it fake spring.
Yeah,
but I was
full
actually,
spring is the term I've heard.
So I was talking to someone from a German brand, and they said the translation would be spring of illusion.
That's good.
And I liked that. I liked that.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna find out what the German is and start saying it in
that would be better.
Yeah.
Not the translation, but the literal version, I think.
All right. Wrist check out of the way. Kat, you've been guarding the questions.
Yeah. The
Let's
gatekeeper.
let's get this started. What have we got? What's first on the docket here?
Well, maybe we'll get to some of the pizza questions later in the episode because there's a lot of chatter about pizza and people got pretty spicy in the comments there. But we'll start off with some watch questions first.
Okay. Yeah. Ease us in with some watch questions.
Yeah. First one, and I'm gonna shout out as many of these usernames as I can if I can read them. From Idaho Jones, he asks, or she maybe, predictions on Tudor this year. Announcement for their 100-year celebration. Any predictions from either of you?
So I wrote an article about Tudor's 100th anniversary a couple months ago, like in January. And my prediction then was they wouldn't do anything major. It would be like kind of like some more subtle releases because they're like, I was thinking like they're part of the Rolex family. Like Rolex doesn't really have like a big, they don't have like big celebrations. They don't have like, they would never have like a new watch with like the anniversary logo on the dial or anything like that. So I'm imagining Tudor wouldn't do anything like super loud or ostentatious for their 100-year anniversary, but I imagine we'll get that answer very soon at Watches and Wonders. There will be something. I have no inside information. Tudor's one of those brands that kind of keep things pretty guarded until the, like the very moment of Watches and Wonders. So I think that they'll do something like kind of quiet and subtle, maybe like a couple of things throughout the year. Kate, do you have any thoughts on what we might be looking at for Tudor's 100?
Yeah, I'm feeling torn because I too have been kind of in anticipation of this for the brand and doing my own speculation. And it's like, I do feel like last year there was a big focus on the Black Bay. So like there's part of me that's thinking, okay, that was kind of a focus last year. Maybe that will not be a focus. Maybe we'll be getting some more kind of like one-off vintage inspired homage, like kind of something that's not part of a core collection. But then there's like another part of me that can't shake how significant the Black Bay feels for the brand. And that like, if there were going to be a model family to kind of celebrate the brand's anniversary, that would be it. So that's absolutely not a straight answer at all, kind of arguing either side of why it could not be a focus on the Black Bay or why it could be. But that's kind of all that I've been noodling with.
Yeah. That's fair.
I think that's, I mean, you're never going to you're probably never going to lose money betting on the Black Bay because there are so many. They go back to the Black Bay so frequently. But I think it would make sense if they're going to do something, to like mass market to like celebrate their 100th anniversary, that it would be kind of like based in the Black Bay.
Yeah.
I really like the weird stuff that Tudor does. So like I would love like I thought like, that's one of the more exciting like Tudor releases, or like like the silver Black Bay 58 and stuff like that. I like the oddball stuff. So like I would welcome that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I think like for me, I agree. I think they would do something with the Black Bay line if they follow in Rolex's footsteps. Rolex tends to use materials in celebration and then often make it limited, whether it's
also
limited
colors
production.
too. They use green to
So we've seen that done with like the Daytona in the past and celebrating different milestones. And I think, we could see maybe a limited production Black Bay in either maybe a different material we haven't seen before or a different dial. But I do think it would be limited, whether it's a hard limit or like limited production for this, which makes sense for a celebration or an anniversary watch. But I'm really excited. I'm getting pumped for Watches and Wonders.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of expectations around Tudor specifically this year. I think because like everyone kind of knows that it's their 100. They've done a good job of kind of like subtly reinforcing that it's their 100th anniversary without like a huge campaign around it. So I think people are aware and know that like there's probably something coming. Let me ask you guys before we move on to another question. What do you think about like the practice brought more broadly of brands kind of like using anniversaries as an excuse to come out with new limited editions and so forth? I feel like, this is like a joke every year. Like brands never miss an opportunity to do this. I'm getting a little burnt out.
Yeah,
like Tudor's 100th is a big deal, but like there's a lot of brands that do that, anniversaries of like cases and movements and like, there's always an opportunity.
I think big milestones make sense, not so much smaller ones, but unless you're innovating something that's very crazy and cool and innovative. But yeah, 50 years, 100 years, that should be celebrated.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty big.
I think that's fair. Cait, what do you think?
Cait?
Yeah, not just when it comes to anniversaries, right? I think there's so many instances, you could make the parallel to collaborations where it's like that kind of got to be a dime a dozen and, and then there's kind of fatigue like around it. And I think anniversaries have kind of ratcheted up in that way where, yes, it maybe used to kind of historically be, like you were saying, Kat, like a milestone of 50 years, 100 years. And now it's every little nuanced thing that we can come up with the anniversary. But I don't know, like I'm a big like queen kind of gal. So it's hard for me to stray away from a celebration. And I think even if across the board, and we have more and more and more brands coming to market all the time. So of course there's going to be more and more type milestones, but it's like, if you think about it just within the context of one brand, I'm like, I see that why that's important to them. But then to us, we look at a laundry list of like every brand, and especially some years where it's like, what was going on? What was in the water that year? There's a lot of anniversaries of something. So again, I'm kind of like mixed signals about it, just like my earlier answer.
All right. What's the next question on the list, Kat?
Next question is from Daniel, and he asked, do I buy a bronze watch in 2026? Is it a fad? And he would like to hear our hot takes on bronze watches.
Is this Daniel, not Daniel from Okay. So I know Daniel's a Boston area watch collector, and he has a bunch of bronze watches, and he has a bronze watch that he's like well,
he says that he will always buy them. He's just curious on our opinions.
I think that
it's a fad.
I'm not a huge fan of bronze as a case material, to be honest. Like I just don't like I'm aesthetically, I'm just not into like the look of a bronze case when it patinas. But I think it's like a perfectly fine, material. I'm just like, aesthetically, it's just not for me. It seems like maybe the trend is sort of dying down. I'm not seeing quite as many bronze watches come to market as we were maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when they were like really, really hot. But I don't know. I don't have like a super strong opinion on that beyond just like my own personal taste. But I think listen, Daniel has a huge collection, an impressive collection, where he like does not really tend to discriminate too much. So, I mean, if he likes something, I think you should buy it. That's my advice to Daniel specifically. But Cait, what do you think what's your take on bronze watches?
Well, it's hard for me to separate my general take versus the additional context that you just gave, because when I hear that somebody might have maybe not his entire collection, since you said it's a lot, but a niche subset of his collection that's devoted to bronze watches, like I've never heard of anybody else that's done that. So I say lean in and be like one of very few people potentially worldwide that has gone deep on, again, maybe bronze watches that I wouldn't immediately even think of.
Yeah.
I support somebody that has a strange watch interest or niche that is against the grain and leaning into that. So just forget my personal opinions on bronze watches. Just on principle, I say yes. Who cares if it's a trend? Keep leaning in.
Yeah.
So I'll post a link to Daniel's Instagram on the show notes for this episode. I'm sure there's a picture of one of his bronze watches that he like had patinated like so heavily it like had this like it was basically green, like he
has a picture of it in the Slack group too.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, so like he has a real interest in this. I think from like a science perspective, he's like just interested in like how these things.
And it's kind of cool. Yeah, I I've never thought about that. Like if you're I think I've always stayed away from any watch that requires me to work on it, which would be like bronze and silver. And I just want to wear it. I don't want to think about having to like maintain it and clean it all the time. I do clean my watches occasionally, but not to that level of detail. But I never thought about the fact that like you could be someone that's into science, or even like now thinking about it, this would be a cool watch to give a kid so they could see how it changes over time. I've never thought about that. Like that would have been cool as a, an 8 or 9-year-old to be given a watch that you could see change and the material change, especially in your school and you're learning about the periodic table. And like, I don't know, that's an angle I've never thought about before. That's kind of neat.
Teach them about responsibility of cleaning your watch. Like if you want your watch to stay, it's better than having a pet, like it's
debatable.
Debatable. I didn't grow up with a dog. I would need a watch to teach me responsibility.
So it's a lot less work, that's for sure.
Probably, yeah.
Well, on the note of materials, we have another question here I'll follow up with. This one is actually specifically for you, Zach. And where did it go? Oh my gosh, I'm getting lost in the Slack.
So many great questions. We're getting lost.
Oh, wait, here, from Captain Sano. Zach, since you're a fan of silver case watches, why aren't there more silver cases and bracelets in general? And I guess just to hear your feelings too, Cait, on silver.
Yeah, I think that because it's like unlike bronze, like silver is like silver's like not a great material, for to make a robust watch case. I was just a little bit more delicate, and I think the patina for some people, depending on your taste, is even less appealing. Like silver can like really tarnish and turn black, and it doesn't look great. It's a material that you like actually do kind of have to care for. So it's another kind of just example of a like less than optimal metal for a watch. I find it to be like pretty beautiful, and like that's why I have a couple of silver watches. I didn't like necessarily seek them out, just sort of like worked out that way. The bracelet question is interesting. I remember when we just mentioned it, the Tudor Black Bay 58 in silver came out. There were a lot of people who were like, why not make a bracelet out of silver? I think like that there you're really asking for like a lot of, a lot of patina that you might not want. Yeah, it's very soft.
The metal softer, yeah.
Yeah, silver's very soft, and I think it would probably not look great like after a while.
Yeah.
Of course, like people have been wearing silver jewelry for a very long time, on their bodies. So like, that's the counterpoint to that argument about the bracelet.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But yeah, I think it's just, the industry has kind of decided it's a less than ideal material, But Cait, I'd be curious to know your opinion. You were also right about jewelry. So maybe from like a jewelry perspective, you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with all of the practical reasons that you kind of described in terms of watchmaking. And I do think that compared to jewelry, in this case, at least, some of those practical concerns are more valid because we're talking about wear and tear that's protecting the mechanics that you rely on for, the watch to work, whereas jewelry can just be more focused on the aesthetics. From that perspective, though, I mean, I do think that, silver jewelry had a major moment when I was younger, and it was like, that was, all you wore. And, and like Tiffany and Co. had their like silver jewelry and stuff. And I do think from a like purely trend perspective, it's kind of coming back around in the jewelry world, and maybe informed by a cost of gold and people are looking for alternatives, but a lot more mixed metal things. So I think from, again, kind of a more purely aesthetic and trend perspective, I could see that coming back, see that trickle over into the watch world. And to that end, I'll give a little plug for a story that I have coming forth, Nomos with Mark Braun.
It will be up, by the way, by the time this podcast airs. So
okay, great. So he has some desires to perhaps create a silver watch for Nomos in the future, if they can, again, from machining and all that kind of perspective. But he did mention, like, I think this would be limited because I think maybe the demand wouldn't be as high. And just like we're talking about here with the bronze or with silver, that it does take a certain kind of collector who wants that evolution of the material over time, or wants to invest in that level of care. I agree. It's not for everybody. It's not for the masses. It's for a specific person.
Yeah.
Do you think, Cait, a lot of people are getting into these other materials because of a vintage market too now, where so many people are buying vintage pieces that are silver and different materials in general. And I think, like, do you think people are becoming more comfortable because of that as well? Not necessarily in the watch world, but in like the jewelry world. Because if I go to my antique shop that's here, like, they have so much that's silver, and I have pieces handed down to me from like my grandmother, and they're tarnished because I need to like buy stuff to clean them up. But I don't know. I feel like people are getting into vintage shopping and thrifting so much more now, where it's harder to find like actually like really nice pieces because the market's just eating them up and reselling them. And I don't know.
I mean, listen, I hadn't thought about that so kind of specifically until you brought it up in this moment, but I think that's like a great observation. It's, again, if we kind of go out to the industry more broadly, specifically what we've seen happen in the past 5 or 6 years, where there have been some, legitimate, obviously like production related and stuff reasons that there's been a little bit of a swing away from primary to secondary vintage. But to that end, I think that has made, even if that was like a practical decision of people kind of going towards vintage pieces at first, I think it's created another effect where it's made people more curious about vintage, want to get more educated about vintage. And I think that is increasingly informing what brands, are doing with the new production pieces, is seeing the interest that has grown in vintage pieces and maybe analyzing like, how can we start bringing that into new pieces that we're creating? So I think that's a very valid observation.
Yeah, it's interesting. What are both of your thoughts, just curious, on some of the mixed materials? Because I know, is it Omega that has like a bronze gold? Am I thinking of it? Is it Omega? Or
Yeah, Omega has Omega has a bronze gold alloy, which my understanding is like mostly bronze and has like a small amount of like a gold alloy.
But it's supposed to like, patina a lot slower and stay, shining longer.
My somewhat cynical take is that most of that's just like marketing and like a way for brands to get the word gold into a, into
price.
Yeah. Yeah. And exactly. I guess the, price of gold, fluctuates, but it's going up rapidly now.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, there's an opportunity.
But then we have like Ceratanium from IWC, which I also think is fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your, I love these blended materials because I think they're really neat and innovative too. Like, I'm curious, Cait, on your thoughts on those.
So you're talking more like alloys.
Mm-hmm.
So again, interesting. I'll try not to plug it too much because unfortunately it's a story for a different outlet and we won't name who that is. But because I'm freelance, in case that wasn't clear at the onset of me being a contributor. So I actually will have a story forthcoming about this where I explore, and Zach, like, I totally appreciate your like cynical marketing angle. And I think that there's at least like a degree of truth to that. But I made some conjecture around like, brands are always kind of looking for a new way to have a signature and something that's distinctly theirs that separates them from other brands. And I made some conjecture about, are alloys a way to do that? And again, thinking about pieces created today will ultimately one day become vintage pieces down the line. And will that be something that people look back on and they're really able to, a particular brand by exactly the tone of the metal or, the composition of the metal? Will that be a way to kind of test, like, does this have complete original like parts and an original bracelet to it, or has something been changed? And will that also mark this moment in time? Because it is a bit of a trend and kind of a hot thing right now to have your own proprietary material of whatever persuasion, and to that end, perhaps it'll maybe be a trend for a decade or something. But again, like 50 years down the road, will people look back and say, oh, we know that watches that came from this particular period, like that was a trend that we saw. This is something we saw brands playing with. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and. To my softer take and Zach's take.
I like it.
I think the real test is if 50 years from now, people will be wondering, was this watch discussed on a podcast? That will be the thing that everyone measures these things.
We'll see if podcasts are even around in 50 years. Who knows?
Boy.
Probably not.
I mean,
maybe this will live forever. You never know.
Everything lives forever on the internet.
All right, switching gears a little bit here. From Sean. Shout out Sean. We just saw him in Dallas. Seiko just launched an updated Marine Master with more accurate and higher power reserve, quick adjust class, but with a price increase, put a range between $3,600 and $3,900.
Mm-hmm.
He asked, do we think Seiko's getting really close to Longines territory or Tudor territory? And will that be a hard sell for them as they move up market? We think the specs are worth the price increase.
I mean, I think it's probably been a hard sell for them as they've kind of like gone up market, which is seems to be the verdict on Seiko among the enthusiast crowd over the last few years, is that they've sort of abandoned that sub $1,000, sub $500 sort of like enthusiast market for something that is like approaches Tudor and Longines and brands like that. But they keep making these watches, so I imagine people are buying them, and it's not hurting them. I just that new Marine Master that he's referring to, and we'll put the link in the show notes, obviously. Like, I'm just kind of bored by that, like them sort of like just going back to the well on that over and over again. I've just lost track of how many times they've made a version of that watch that kind of is made to look somewhat like the original, but not exactly. And I'm just kind of getting a little tired of the formula. But in theory, there's sort of like one for every type of collector, whether you want like the exact replica or one with like a higher end movement or whatever. And I do like I think the new one with the limited edition with the degradé blue dial is actually like very nice looking. So I think Seiko's
but the adjustment in the movement, a slightly long power reserve, that doesn't do a lot for you in terms of justifying sort of the price point of these, or you're just bored with sort of the I guess collection.
I have to like plead a little bit of ignorance here because I haven't spent a lot of time with any of those Seikos with the higher end movements. Like, they're apparently like very good movements, but like everyone makes a very good movement, at this point. So I think it depends on what you're interested in and why you would want to buy one of these watches. If like the technical specifications are the reason you collect and the reason that these things are appealing to you, the new one might be might be particularly interesting. It's not the first time they've made one of these Marine Masters with that movement. It's the first time that there's been one in the permanent collection.
Okay, I see.
With those new higher end movements. So I guess we'll see. Like I said, this will be in the permanent collection, so we'll see how long it stays in the collection if there's sustained interest in it. It's not something that's on like my list to pick up necessarily anytime soon. Cait, have you had a chance to see or read about these new Seikos at a higher price point, or any thoughts in general on kind of like the state of Seiko and what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I've like seen the release, but that's the extent of it. And, and again, like, I'll be very candid, like, Seiko is not a brand that I've particularly like done a ton of work in or like taken a lot of personal interest in. So I don't have much to say about this like very specific example or this brand, but I think just more broadly, this like a push and pull that I've seen from a lot of brands that really sat at a highly accessible price point, maybe just 3-figure pieces or like low 4-figure pieces, more and more having a like higher dollar piece that's kind of a jump up to the next like price bracket. And, like, I think that is something that warrants a broader discussion of like, I understand a brand like not wanting to entirely pinhole or limit themselves and like wanting to play with advancing like certain features or the quality of a movement or something. But it does beg that question, particularly with a brand like this that has quite a rich history and has a bit of a cult following by a certain subset of collectors, that, you know, it's like, by doing that, is it a positive thing because you're opening up to new people that are maybe really interested in those things? Or are you isolating a client base that has been loyal? You know, I think it's a really tricky thing for brands to be navigating.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I think specifically Seiko, because to your point, Cait, there's so many Seiko collectors out there that have never had to spend more than 3 figures on a Seiko watch. And what I've seen in the last, Kazan, correct me if I'm wrong, in the last like 3 years with Seiko is they've significantly cut down the amount of releases they're doing anymore in general. We used to see them pop watches out like all the time. I mean, Seiko was in my inbox like once a month. And it's like they don't release much now. And then when they do, it does seem like they're releasing things that are of that higher price point. And for me, and I'm a huge Seiko fan, I was a gateway for me in this hobby to begin with. I have a hard time justifying this price point, $3,600, $3,900, because, and I'm not someone that always thinks about resale value, but I buy and sell a lot of watches, so I can't ignore it either. And, you know, I don't know, it's just, it's a hard buy for $4,000. You can get a used like Omega Seamaster with an incredible movement inside, or yes, a Tudor, and Longines is doing some actually good things. And I don't say this in a way that like, I don't think brands that typically have lower price point watches should always stay in that range, because look at what Christopher Ward's doing. When they released the Belcanto for the first time, that was like, oh my gosh, that's more money than any Christopher Ward has been. But they did something really innovative and crazy. Same with the Loco. Like, I think you can depart from those price ranges, but to your point, Cait, like you have to offer a big value. And to me, I just don't see it with this watch in particular, other than it's like limited and it like has a slightly better movement. Offering a quick adjust clasp, everybody's doing that. Like that doesn't push the needle, you know?
Yep.
And it kind of sucks to see, because yes, as a Seiko fan, I want more Seiko watches. I want a bunch of cool divers. They have such a long catalog of things they could pull from. And yeah, their marketing is just really strange, I think, over the last few years.
Something's going on. It's I think you're spot on, Kat, that you know, Seiko used to kind of like be the sort of like the engine of like what watch media like produced in a lot of ways. Like, there was just there was always like a Seiko story. You could always kind of count on, you know, like a Seiko story like doing well on a website or on an Instagram post. And like those days are just kind of like behind us, I think, because they have gone up market. They've changed their strategy. They're not releasing watches as frequently, and it's just a different environment that they're operating in, and like the cadence is not the same. And it'll be interesting. Like, we continue to track it. We continue to cover Seiko, obviously, but it's a different brand than it was like 4 or 5 years ago. And 4 or 5 years from now, it could change again in any number of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's ask a fun question that's not watch related, now that we're about halfway through the episode. All right, what are some of your favorite rising movie stars? Do you have any rising movie stars? People that are like, you know, rising up right now in the industry. Cait, I don't know. Are you big? Are you in the film sort of world as much as me and Kazan are?
No, I'm absolutely not. The other reason that I was laughing, though, and I don't want to put words in Zach's mouth, but I feel like when we have talked about this before, that like, I don't know, for me, again, I will just kind of like age myself on the air. Like, I'm going back and like digging back in the like old archives. Like, I have a practice of taking, you know, an actor or actress that I really love. Like, I recently did this with Michelle Williams, where I go to her IMDb page and I look for some like weird deep cuts that I've never heard of from, you know, like the 90s. And then I want to go watch that. Like, I'm just, again, like, I will just age myself. I kind of like capped out at a certain point, and then I increasingly like lost interest into what's happening like in the modern space. So I'll let you guys jump in and maybe I'll think of something or like riff off of that. But
Sure.
yeah.
So like what Cait's describing is sort of like my attitude towards music. I feel like my music taste kind of stops in like 2012 or so. That's when I stopped like paying attention to like new, and I think it was like a big part of my life. Like, you know, like Pitchfork was the first website I would like visit like every single morning for years. And then I just like, I got tired of like, it became exhausting to follow new bands and I just stopped. So like, that's sort of like, I relate to that strongly because that's how I feel about a different, you know, area of interest in mine. I do keep up with movies, obviously. Rising Star. I mean, I don't really, it's hard for me to determine what rising is. He's not rising, but he's on my mind because I just saw Project Hail Mary over the weekend. And like, it's a big, like, you know, star vehicle for Ryan Gosling, who's great in that movie. He's been around for a long time though.
Yeah, I'd argue he's already a movie star.
I know he's a big star, but he like, I would say he like carries this movie in a way that like he's literally like alone, you know, like on screen for like big chunks of the movie. So
yeah, I'm excited to see that one.
Yeah, it's quite good. I mean, everyone's talking about Timothée Chalamet because he just lost his third straight Academy Award.
Poor Timmy.
Yeah, poor guy. Yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of like maybe like the next sort of like generational movie star that, you know, will be like he's
certainly
like,
in the. Yeah.
He's got like Leo DiCaprio like kind of vibes where it's like he's done some really incredible stuff like Call Me by Your Name that's like very deep, but then he's done very commercial stuff as well. Yeah, I would agree with that one.
Yeah, he seems to be like kind of following the DiCaprio mold where he's very smart about the projects he's choosing to do. He's doing stuff that's like broadly commercial, made with like really talented filmmakers, and that's sort of like the DiCaprio mold. And if you think about like, you know, like DiCaprio is like unquestionably, I think, like the biggest male movie star in the world and has been for like a decade at least.
Yeah.
And I think that like in 30 years, like you can imagine Chalamet kind of like occupying that role, you know, like being, you know, front row at the Oscars every year, you know, having like one huge movie every like 2 or 3 years that is like an event. So yeah,
took
like
DiCaprio forever to get an Oscar though, right?
Yeah,
that's true, and it might take Chalamet a while. He's like I said, he's been nominated 3 times and has not won yet. And the thing I like about Chalamet is that he approaches movies kind of like sports. Like when you see him give an acceptance speech for like an award that he does win, like not an Academy Award, he talks about like wanting to achieve greatness and wanting to win. You never hear people talk about like
respect,
wanting to win like as many awards as possible. I think that's like really interesting, and that also might like hold him back a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think he's definitely a rising star. I like him. Like he's a fantastic actor and he's done some great work. And to both of your point, maybe Dune is been his like Titanic in a way. Like Leo's big movie was that. And I think for Timothy, like, I mean, can you get bigger than Dune right now? Like that is like the biggest series. And I was just thinking Zendaya. I think she's also like. She did Challengers a few years ago, which was great. And I can kind of see her on this trajectory too, to be like a bigger movie star. But I also was just thinking of Austin Butler. I think he's going to be someone like a different path, but I can see this very like Americana, like Brad Pitt-esque sort of actor from him. And he's been choosing like really cool roles recently too. And he's pretty young and was relatively unknown, at least from my perspective, until he did the Elvis movie. And then he became like kind of big. And then obviously he's done Dune. I guess they've all been in Dune. Yeah, the cast of Dune and the cast of what's the show Zendaya is on
Well,
HBO.
see, and that's what I was about to say. Is
Euphoria,
yes,
good. Everyone in Euphoria is going to be a huge star. Yeah, Jacob Elordi. The list goes on. Yeah.
No, I was hesitating to say Zendaya because other than Dune, and I guess I did see Challengers too, but I wasn't equating her as much of a film actress because I'm a huge Euphoria fan. So that's what I associate her with. And let it be known that not only is her acting, and spoiler alert, like she's a severe addict in that show and has to do some really what I perceive as very difficult scenes.
Yeah.
But there's also an incredible, like, largely original score for that show that she does a lot of vocals for.
Oh yeah,
she's an incredible singer.
Yeah.
Like incredible. So she's one of those, like, what is it where they go for the awards and like all the different categories? Yeah. Like she's a contender for that, like years down the line.
The Greatest Showman. She did that movie and was like fantastic in it. And I think she's a Disney, like she's a child of the Disney world, I think. But so was Leonardo DiCaprio. He did Disney stuff and he did Growing Pains and like, and Timothy like started out so young too himself. I think like, these big actors of today, when you look back, they started so young. But yeah, she's kind of got all the boxes checked because she sings and she dances and she acts. Or are you going to say something, Kazan? I see it.
I was just going to say, so I haven't seen all of Euphoria. I've seen like most of the first season, and then I kind of like what I saw. I was impressed by. It's just one of those shows that like I didn't like follow through with. I'm going to blow up a spot a little bit. Blake Mallon told me that he got into Euphoria just recently in Dallas at Wind Up. He was looking for something to watch, and like he got really into Euphoria. So
I haven't.
That is not a light watch to just get into while you're traveling. It's a pretty heavy show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like, I've had some interesting shows and movies that I've seen on the plane and people watching, and I'm always like, that's an interesting watch for a plane when there's like people around you. But you know what, good for you if you really have no care in the world. I definitely do. I am so self-conscious and have been in awkward moments in long flights where I've like paused it at the wrong moment, and of course the flight attendant's taking my order or something, and I'm just like,
so people don't get the wrong idea about our CEO. I don't think he was watching it on the plane. I think he was enjoying
just, like,
Euphoria,
in his hotel.
like just in down moments.
I watch just like Friends when I get back to the hotel, or like Gilmore Girls. I'm not watching something super deep, but I need to add that to my watch list because I feel like I've heard so many good reviews, and it's a dark show from what I can gather. But
the new season is finally coming back, so now's the time to get caught up.
Now is the time, I think. Maybe I should get back into it and catch up. I watched Sicario twice when we were in Dallas because I fell asleep.
That's a dark place.
Yeah. That was a fun question. What's
I think we have time for a couple more. We'll jump back into watches here from Steve. This is specifically for you, Kazan. He knows that you don't typically use a chronograph function on your chronographs. Are there any complications you do use and you love?
I mean, I have a couple of GMT watches where I'll use the GMT function. But yeah, Steve's right. I don't really have much use for a chronograph. I think I said on the podcast that I don't have any chronographs. That's not true. I do have one. I have a vintage Favre Luba that I picked up about a year ago in Chicago at the Chicago Wind Up Watch Fair. But I'm not timing stuff with chronographs, and I generally, like, most of my watches don't really have complications beyond a calendar, beyond a date. So but yeah, if I'm traveling with a GMT watch, I will use that. How about you guys? Are you guys into like super complicated watches, astronomical complications, timing complications? What have you got?
The moon phases. I don't know, Cait. What's your take? Do you gravitate towards anything specific?
Well, first of all, I think this is a fantastic question that is inspiring me to craft some kind of story of like who is actually using their watch complications. Yeah. No, I'm just going to continue to dig the hole deeper on what a deadbeat watch journalist that I am. So today I'm not even wearing a watch, but if you do find me wearing a watch, my watch won't even be set to the correct time.
That's okay.
Which drives some of the people in this industry absolutely crazy. I've had many people who nearly just couldn't contain themselves, and they asked me, could you please take that off and let me set it for you? Because it bothered them so much.
That's ridiculous.
So am I using a watch complication? Absolutely. No, I'm not. I'm not even using the time function. So I'm definitely not using a complication. But again, I think this is a fantastic question of, it is this push and pull, right? Of like, we don't need them. Obviously, I'm proof. I don't need this to tell the time,
Mm-hmm.
And so who is using these? I will say I do like a chiming complication is very beautiful. I can at least say that I don't own any type of repeater piece, but when I am in the presence of one and I get to hear it and you see the gongs, I think that's quite beautiful sensory experience, visual, auditory. What about you, Kat?
Well, you mentioned like the repeaters and the chiming. I think that maybe this is a hot take. That is like such an underdog complication. I never would have thought that I would have like usefully used a chiming watch. And when I bought the Bel Canto and I wear it, it's kind of nice to know it's the top of the hour. And like, yeah, I can't explain it. It's just like, it's like, oh, I've been spending an hour working on whatever I'm like deep into it, whether it's editing or whatever. So yeah, that is something that's like randomly, it's been really surprising to me. But I do have a lot of GMTs and I have a lot of dive watches. I have learned over the years that I am not a chronograph person. I think maybe the dials are too busy for me. I like to really read a watch at a glance pretty quickly. So I think I've owned like 5 Speedmasters in my like history of watch collecting. And I've told myself finally, like, don't buy another Speedmaster or another chronograph. Tried it, it's not working. But yeah, you know, Cait, I put watches on all the time because it's like, it's my morning ritual to put a watch on because otherwise sometimes I do feel sort of naked. But a lot of times I won't set it immediately. I'll need to go feed the dogs. And then I get up here and I start working and it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I realize I never set my watch. And you know what? It's fine. It's fine. No one cares. Because even when I do have it set, I still pick up my phone.
About each other today. That's really,
I pick up my phone all the time, even when I do have a watch that's working. You know, it's just habit.
You know, so Andy Warhol famously like wore a Cartier tank, I believe, and it was never set. You know, so you could pull from worse parts of culture.
That's it, Zach. You just trying to be like Andy Warhol.
Yeah,
that was the real answer. That's what I'm going to start telling people now.
I think that's fine. It also like it's an interesting conversation because there's this like part of watch culture that is like very, very focused on like functionality and tool watches and using your watches. And I think that's like a large part of the Worn and Wound audience. If I had to take a guess, but there's a whole mass of people who like have chronographs that are not using their chronographs or GMTs that are not using their GMTs. I would hazard to guess most people who purchase a watch with a complication are not using it in the intended way.
Yeah.
And I think that like, I think that's fine. And I think there's probably like a bit of gatekeeping, around like the watch culture and how it relates to complications and using them. And it is something that's kind of interesting to explore. But I fully support people just wearing and owning watches however
wearing and buying what you want.
Yeah.
Who cares? It's like someone buying a sports car. If I bought a sports car, I'm not going 100 miles an hour. I'm going to go whatever speed I want to go. And it's like, it doesn't matter. People can get over it.
Get over it. That's the clip for this podcast.
Soundbite.
Get over it.
Episode. Okay, let's do one more question. This is not watch related, but I think this is actually pretty interesting. This is from Sean. He asked, what's a once high quality clothing brand that you loved, but that's now in the shadow of its former self or it's completely gone? I can think of several. And I can start if you're
Why don't you? If
over.
you've got a few on your mind,
so,
why don't you start?
I would say for me, well, there's 2 that come to mind. Well Bean, I think, is one brand that I bought, in the late 90s, a lot of sweaters, and my parents would buy me a lot of stuff and boots. And I've bought stuff from them in like the last 5 years that I've just like worn through completely fast. And I'm not like super hard on my clothes. I have a lot of clothes and I feel like the quality's gone downhill a little bit, and would certainly say like the Gap group, which is like Gap, Old Navy, Banana Republic. Like I had so much like staple pieces from them from like the early 2000s. And I felt like that was a place that someone like middle class could buy like a really good t-shirt or good pair of jeans from Gap or even Banana Republic. And now like their t-shirts are see-through. Like the materials have just, again, kind of gone downhill. So I don't feel like they're the same value that maybe they once were. And there's also a lot of more competition nowadays too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, those are like the 2 that spring to mind would be LL Bean and then just sort of like the Gap sort of parent group.
So the one that comes to mind for me is Brooks Brothers. I feel like, when I graduated from college, I had to like buy like new clothes for like my first like office job. And I remember I bought Brooks Brothers shirts kind of like at the tail end of like when they were still pretty good. And like, it was very shortly thereafter that they like I forget exactly what the chain of events, but the company was sold, or there was a bankruptcy, or there was something that
I think there
dramatically
was.
changed the quality of those of that brand. So that's the one that comes to mind for me, is that like Brooks Brothers was like a very important brand, that is like kind of like an iconic like menswear brand that is just like a now considered a shadow of its former self. Cait, how about you? Anything can come to mind?
So for me, it's a brand called Lou and Grey, which is part of like, I think it's like the Ann Taylor and like Loft kind of conglomerate. But this was the kind of like younger, like cool girl, but to me kind of like maybe like a little higher quality than like Loft. And so it still exists, but in the pandemic, they closed all their stores and took the Lou and Grey subset to like online only. So first, that in itself was a big loss, because I know at least like the store that I always used to go to in New York City, the brick and mortar, was in kind of the Union Square area. And they not only had like a very cool, like 2-level space, but they would host really incredible events there. And like not even related to the brand, but like I went to some cool like literary events there.
That's cool.
And they were always just doing very cool kind of like female focused communal things. But also they would do, collabs with, again, kind of like artists and other mediums, cool sweatshirt from like an artist collab that they did. And I have some pieces from them still that I love and that I felt like the quality was great. But when they pivoted to online only, I placed an order for something, and I too, like, I felt like the quality was not the same.
Yeah.
That experiential element that I used to like is now gone. And, it's kind of more just like the mass market, like, email spam kind of stuff. And yeah, that made me really sad, because that was a place that for my first, pre-pandemic era of New York, that it was a great place to go in and just buy something basic that was high quality if you needed it. But like I said, they also hosted some cool events, and I just kind of loved everything about their vibe. And now there's just kind of nothing special or remarkable about it, I don't think.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's sad when a brand just it's sad when a brand disappoints you after a period of time, when like you really like kind of you get attached to these things and like the culture
I'm a
around
loyalist,
the brand,
like through and through. So like if I find anything I like, I will usually buy a lot of it, or I will like buy from them for years. Like I've been on AT&T since I was 15. Like I'm not changing. And like customer service means a lot to me, and like the value of things that you spend your money on mean a lot to me. And yeah, it does hurt when a brand that you really love, and Cait, seems like you experienced a lot of like memories with them, kind of goes away, and it really makes you sad. Yeah.
I mean, we experienced that with watches too. I think there's there's
that's true.
Close parallels there with the watch industry.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good spot to leave it. Cait, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and answering our questions. We'll do. I know there's some pizza questions we didn't get to. We'll do like
there were so many questions we didn't get to. There was a lot. I'll save them.
We're gonna have to make like a special pizza super episode, I think, based on what I saw.
And tacos. There was a lot of taco chatter.
Oh my god, that might have to be. It might have to be a series. New narrative podcast.
Just like a food. I'm hearing like just like a food podcast.
I'm down. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions, whether they were on topics we addressed or not. We'll lots of good ideas in the Slack as always, and we will be back next week with another all new episode of the podcast. Until then, take care.